The book's title is Freedom and Unity, A History of Vermont. The authors are me, Michael Sherman, and Gene Sessions and P. Jeffrey Potash. We worked on it together. We thought of it as a comprehensive history of Vermont, or as comprehensive as we could make it without making it go into more than one volume. And it starts with the formation of the mountains, and it goes, we were making additions to it right before we published it in 2004. So it's got a lot of information jammed into it about people, about politics, about social movements, about intellectual movements, some literature, some of the art. We tried to touch on as many of the topics that we thought Vermonters wanted to know about and people might want to know about Vermont as we could. There had not been a single history of Vermont written since the 1920s, when a big 4-volume history had come out. And there had been a few other shorter pieces and some popular pieces and coffee table pieces, but no single volume which was a comprehensive history. And as I was leaving the Vermont Historical Society, the opportunity came up to pick up this project, which had been kind of abandoned because it was 15, 20 years old and nothing had happened. And the trustees asked me if I would work on a new history of Vermont. And I agreed to do it with the cooperation of my 2 colleagues, because it seemed like too big a project for one person to take on. And we worked on it. I worked on it for 8 years. Each of them worked on it for 4 years. And we produced this monster of a 700-page book, which I think surprised everybody, us included. Vermont, 700 pages? You got to be kidding. What is there to say about Vermont? And a couple of the reviews actually said that. Why such a big book? But if you set that first response aside, it's been a very successful book, and it's very satisfying. I mean, when we brought it out, and we were surprised by the size of it. We thought, well, this will be a doorstop, or people will use it to do exercises in the morning or something like that. But in fact, people have read it, not necessarily start to finish. They dip into it in places where they have particular interests, and we hear from people. People write letters to us as authors saying that I just got this book and I really like it, and that's always very nice to hear. When we decided to start at the beginning, eventually we decided to start way back at the beginning, billions of years ago, because the mountains are so important as a part of not just the geography and the topography of the place, which is obvious, but also because of the effect of the mountains on the history of the state from the very beginning. So we ended up doing the geology and started with the formation of the mountains, how they got here, and then just continued working on. And we had pretty much decided on some chronological breaking points, and with not being strict about it, but saying, okay, we'll take the mountains up to the time that the French arrive, and then from the French through the statehood, and just figured out what were the big important breaking points or chronological lumps that we could work on, and those became our chapters. The state motto presented for us a puzzle. What does freedom and unity mean? I mean, what did it mean to the people who adopted it as the motto in 1778? But what does it mean in 2012? And we really tried to address that question about individual freedom and the importance of individual freedom in our state, and it's always been a part of our tradition, but also the obligations and the responsibilities and the benefits of association with the town, with the state government, and with the nation. So we are one state in the nation. Vermonters came here not as part of the colonial settlement very much. I mean, the first permanent white settlers came after the French and Indian War, so after 1763. The French had been here before, but they left, or they were chased out, essentially, by the British. But from 1763 into the early part of the 19th century, around 1810, 1812, there was an enormous influx of people from other parts of New England into Vermont. Vermont was not one of the original colonies. It was a state that was created out of New York and New Hampshire, and they fought over it. And actually the state-making part of Vermont has its reflection in our U.S. Constitution. That the article and the clause that talks about how states will be made in the Constitution was really a result of the conflict that New York had with New Hampshire and Vermont about who was going to own it and how was Vermont going to be a separate state. So we had that influence on even the constitution making of our country. All right, so the cover image is a detail of a painting, The View of East Dorset Marble Works, circa 1875 by Frank Childs. And the reason we put it on the cover, if you look at the whole of it, you see it's got everything about Vermont that you need to know. It's got mountains, it's got fields, it's got cows, it's got a railroad, it's got it's got an industry going there. It's got little houses, a church, a meeting house. In a sense, it's a microcosmic view of what the state is about, what the state's history is about, and the tension between those. I mean, the mountains have been not only a geographic figure, but marble comes out of it. They've been an economic resource. It's an agricultural state. We have had industry here from early on, and not as big as elsewhere, but everything that is going on in the state is somehow or another captured in this painting. And so it became a perfect image for what we were trying to accomplish in the book by showing the variety of Vermont. Vermont is not just one thing. It's not just cows or sheep as it used to be. But and people don't think that we've had an industrial history, but we've had an industrial history. People think of us as isolated, but here was the railroad, which connected us to the east, connected us to the west, and played an important part in the development of it. So all of those things that, in a way, characterize Vermont, but might surprise people about Vermont, are captured in this one marvelous painting.